and welcome to the Rainbow Umbrella, the podcast where we talk about anything and everything under the rainbow. And this month I am joined by two very lovely and special wahine to talk about something that is important and significant for all of us, and this is the neurodiversity episode. Welcome Ashley and Jade. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I'm so pleased that we managed to get our schedules to align and get this sorted, especially because, some of us like to be difficult with our schedules. All right, well, like I said, thank you so much for being here and joining me on this very special neurodiversity episode. So yeah, the reason I invited you both along is that you both received later in life, and by that I mean non-child diagnoses for various neurodiverse things. So can we have a little bit of a chat about that? Jade, can we start with you? So do you mind telling us about what led you to your diagnosis, what your diagnosis was, and what that's meant for you?
Yeah, so this is something that I was diagnosed at 20 when I tried to go to university, and I realized that there were major things going on, which meant that I found university really hard, which didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that was the process that led to me getting diagnosed. I fronted up to my GP. My GP referred me to the clinical psychology team at the University of Otago. They diagnosed me with ADHD. I didn't actually present to these services thinking I had ADHD. I actually thought it was something else. And
Right.
so I feel like they were particularly thorough, and I was very pleased. I was very happy with the service I had because they very much went very broad and did some really good testing, which assessed my sort of overall cognitive function, and they came away with ADHD as the diagnosis. Um, on the context of how old I was when I got diagnosed, I was diagnosed as an adult. I definitely got assessed a lot as a child for whatever was going on that was affecting my schooling. But I
Mm.
never got a really solid diagnosis, and I also never had family that felt supported enough to engage with the system to get me diagnosed, to get me supported in that sense. So I was while I was diagnosed at 20, it definitely was it was visible. It was definitely something that was known as a child. Um, a really interesting thing with the fact that I was diagnosed at 20, so that was in 2009. I was both very old and very and very young. I was one of the first wave of people to get diagnosed as an adult. There wasn't actually
Mm.
criteria for adult diagnosis when I was diagnosed, so I felt very unusual. I felt late in the
Mm.
sense that I wasn't diagnosed as a child. But then, since then, it's now become much more common to be diagnosed as an adult, but it's also become a lot more difficult because there's so much demand on the system. So I
Mm.
feel very much like I popped into this at an unusual time, and it's a somewhat an unusual age.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so that's only something I figured out recently, is that my
Mm.
diagnosis was somewhat unusual.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I would definitely like to come back to the demand on services and increasing awareness in a moment. But Ashley, do you want to have a chat about when you received your diagnosis?
Yeah, so my situation was quite different to Jade's. I I'm 34 now. I got diagnosed when I was 31, so really only 3 years ago. It came about because I was struggling quite a lot. But I couldn't understand why I was suddenly struggling. So it was things like making my bed or doing the laundry. It was really, really menial tasks like that. And I never understood why. And I kind of dismissed it as got a bit of a personality quirk.
Mm.
I did really well at school. I got an honors degree. I got a master's degree, completely unmedicated, undiagnosed.
Mm.
Um, and then, yeah, probably around 2021, really started to notice some things were getting a bit hard that weren't previously hard before.
Mm.
Um, Wrote it off as other, mental health issues, a bit of depression, a bit of anxiety, got medicated for those. And it wasn't until someone who had been diagnosed inattentive ADHD as a child said to me, have you ever thought you also might be ADHD? And I was like, I can't be. I did really well in school. I wasn't a naughty little boy that threw chairs at teachers in class, all of these. I was like, this makes no sense to me. And she was like, you should probably look into it. Just say. And I was like, oh, I'll do a bit of reading. And then I did the reading, and it was a bit too close to home, put it that way. And actually rang my mom, and I was like, hey, mom, like, this is making a lot of sense. And I never really thought this was, a possibility for me. And sent mum a few of the articles, and she came back and said, yeah, this all sounds like you. And so I went from there and did a bit more research, found out again the public system was incredibly stretched, but I was fortunate enough to be in a position where I paid for a private diagnosis and went through the system that way. And yeah, sure enough, they diagnosed me with inattentive ADHD when I was 31. Yeah,
I just
that's
wanted
kind of my
to
story.
pop in and say I also was specifically diagnosed with inattentive type ADHD.
I
Yeah.
didn't realize you were both the same. Yeah.
But they show up in also very different ways, which is something we can talk about later as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I love the fact that you brought up, the naughty boy throwing the chair at the teacher sort of thing, because the gendered aspect of this is something that I really wanted to talk about. You both identify as female, but I also have another friend that received a later in life diagnosis who is male, and so it's a shame that he couldn't be here right now, but it would be really interesting to notice the gender differences. Maybe we can do another korero with him at some point. But yeah, so you later in life both identify as female, as Ashley said, not the naughty little boys throwing chairs at teachers, sorry, throwing teachers at chairs. Can you, like, looking back, see how that would be different if your gender was different? Do you feel like it would have been picked up on sooner by your friends, by your family, even by yourself, maybe? Would you have received any sort of support sooner, do you think, in your experience?
Yeah, I one of the place that my brain went when you started talking about the gender differences was I can't necessarily imagine how my childhood experience would have been different if had I been a boy, especially as I have a brother who ostensibly doesn't have it. I say that he's a very focused person in his professional life, but completely chaotic in his private life. So there's also levels of there's levels to this. The place that my brain went was socialization. Had I
Mm,
been socialized as a boy, would I have displayed different behaviors?
mm,
Does it go back as far as had I been a boy, would I have do women present differently because they're inherently different, or do they present differently because we're socialized differently?
mm,
I'm a member of the social camp personally. I do
mm,
believe that the way that we treat little boys and girls right from baby and toddlerhood results in the differences in these behaviors. But in saying that, physically, I feel as though because I do have a friend who is diagnosed combined, so she has inattentive and hyperactive things. And I do think that her ADHD displays differently to me. So I feel like I've
mm,
just answered this question without actually answering the question at all. But that's where my brain went. I kind of can't imagine what it would have been like for me to be a little boy with ADHD because I wasn't
mhm,
socialized like that. But I think
mhm.
that that's for me, that's where I sit in answer to that question.
Yeah, and I
Mm.
think that's an extremely good point. Like, I could see Ashley nodding away there. I feel like we might, at the risk of answering for Ashley, I think we might all be in the same camp there, because I think you've hit the nail on the head, Jade. The socialization of it. You never really hear girls will be girls, right? It's boys will be boys, and that's the kind of blanket coverall for any sort of non-normal or antisocial behavior. I hope those air quotes translate in my voice there. Ashley, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything that Jade was saying. I think for me, the big kicker was actually just last year with Christmas just being, I actually looked through my old high school reports with this new lens. I hadn't read them since, well, probably since high school, um, and actually, like a lot of the signs were there, but it was obviously dismissed by a lot of people because I was doing well in school.
Hmm.
So all of the comments were like, she's great, pleasure to have in class, good sense of humor, does really well academically, seems chaotic was kind of the punchline. Seems chaotic, disorganized, doesn't show up for tests unless it actually has a weighting. It was all of these sorts of things, and and showing a few friends these comments. The general consensus amongst a lot of people was if you were a boy and this was your school report, someone would have been like, "Hey, is something going on?"
Mm,
Um, but because I was doing so well, everyone's like, "Oh, you're just weird. You're just kooky." One of the ways I kind of describe it is, I was put in like an accelerated learning class.
mm.
And the way that it's described to me is accelerated learning is just special ed under a different name. People don't know what to do with you, so they just
Right.
send you off and, you know. So
Hmm.
I don't know if things would have been different, but I do think that if my school report was a boys' school report, it would have probably some more questions would have been asked.
Mm. Yeah, that's a fair point. So, what has being diagnosed meant for you, Ashley? Because we'll carry on from there. Like, how's it changed your life in any way?
It's explained a lot, actually. It, things that I thought were just personality quirks
Mm,
haven't sort of it's made me realize that I can actually manage and change these. Are not just like funny little quirky personality traits. Um, for me, the biggest change is actually was realizing a lot of the stuff I put in place was self managing without realizing it was self managing.
hmm.
Things like to do lists, structure. Even though I hated structure, I actually needed I needed a chart. I
Hmm.
needed things like that. And when I didn't have those, that's when the struggle started. So it's that now knowing that while my brain hates structure, it needs structure. And
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with that. There's like a little sort of light bulb moment of, oh, there's actually nothing wrong with needing these things if it makes your
Hmm.
life easier.
Hmm.
Yeah.
100%. And I think, again, using that hit the nail on the head analogy, that's it. Like, for people that are, potentially listening to this that are wanting to explore a potential diagnosis or, haven't even got to that point, that is the key thing. Just because you need something differently to the way people around you need it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It's just you. And that's it. Jade, what about you? What does the diagnosis mean for you?
Well, I really realized when we answered our first questions that the distance from my diagnosis really has changed the way that I even answered my first question that you asked.
Mm,
And it makes me realize that I I definitely think I experienced a lot of the things that Ashley just touched on, but I've also gotten to the point with my life in that it never becomes background noise because I constantly have to fit into a world that does not suit me. And I have flip-flopped over the years between approaching it from a deficit perspective of I'm always going to have this deficit. I'm always going to need accommodations. I'm always going to struggle regardless of what the world could look like, to feeling at some points like I need the issue is capitalism. I've
Yep.
swung between those two places a lot in my life. I'm currently in the capitalism camp. I might function significantly better if I was allowed to do it in fits and starts and work intensely for several hours and then just be able to log off when it suits me.
Mm.
However, I feel as though I have a lot of emotional distance from my diagnosis now. I also have gotten to a point in my life where I no longer heap the guilt and the shame on myself as a habit. I'm not saying I don't do it because it definitely happens. Because these things are baked into the way that we deal with life. Shame as a reaction to perceived failures is something that I'm probably always going to deal with, but I've now gotten to the point where it's not my default state.
Mhm.
Um, So yeah, an interesting, it's been such a long time for me, and even ticking over the way that I'm responding to you now, I rationalize it massively now. I don't have the very strong grief that I had when I was first diagnosed of I wish I'd known sooner. I don't have those big, strong waves of regret and things like that. Um, yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Do you feel comfortable touching on that a little bit more? Because as I said earlier, there might
yeah.
be people listening to this that feel the same way or experiencing similar emotions but not understanding what that is
Mm.
about. So like as someone that loves you, that's quite hard to hear actually that you felt those strong emotions. So thank you very much for being so open and honest about that.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's a big thing to talk about.
Something that I every now and then in my life I'll come across a concept or a piece of writing or a quote or something that will really affect my worldview and I'll take it forward with me. And something that I came across, I say recently within the last couple of years, which has really informed the way that I approach my life now, is that I can have all the accommodations I want. I can have all of the things in place. I can have all the medication. I can have all of the self-awareness that I need, but it doesn't change the fact that the world is hard for me to be in, and I deserve accommodations, and not just accommodations. I deserve grace for that.
Hmm.
That's the place that I have got to personally.
Hmm.
It's not that I need to get to a point where doing the dishes is not an arduous chore. It's
Hmm.
not that I need to get to the point where I'm always on top of my food prep. I'm always on top of my work. I'm always on top of my life admin. I've actually gotten to a place where it's the most important thing for me to acknowledge is it's probably always going to be hard, and I deserve grace for that.
Mm, absolutely. And what do you think has helped you get to that point?
There was a long period of time in my 20s, especially after my diagnosis, where I picked people to be in my life, like partners and friends, who reflected back at me a critical version of myself that I wanted to be because they were critical people.
Hmm.
And I had to unlearn that I didn't need to put myself in a position where I was not constantly trying to better myself, but I didn't realize that I was unconsciously choosing people that were reflecting a critical worldview of myself back at me. So I
Hmm.
think that moving towards people who don't reflect that back at me, moving towards people who do reflect back at me that it is fine for me to be the way that I am,
Hmm.
has been one of the biggest things for me. And part of it was growth and realizing I didn't recognize those things in the exact terms that I just used. I recognized that there were dynamics to the relationships that I had that were not serving me. And I
Mm.
tried to actively go in a different direction. Like I left a partner with the intent to find a new partner that did not have his characteristics. And I did that.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's the direction that I've realized with my life is that I don't need to just try harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And
That's not the solution.
no, and being cognizant of the fact that the people you were surrounding yourself with, whether it was deliberate or not, were reflecting that critical view
Mm,
back. Actually being able to recognize that and, take the steps to remove yourself from that situation and change the view of you that was being reflected back is is a big step because that's not something that anyone can do easily. What
Yeah.
about you, Ashley? How did you feel when you first got your diagnosis?
Yeah, like I said before, it was kind of that missing jigsaw puzzle piece
Mm-hmm.
for me. It was kind of like, then I sort of reflected a bit on some decisions I'd made, you know, relationships I had had, friendships, whatever. Um, and I think it sort of gave me permission to, and we can talk about this more, to no longer mask to the same level that I was.
Mm-hmm.
And so for anyone who's listening, masking is a whole thing we could probably dedicate an entire episode to, let's be
Mm-hmm.
honest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but, I was always that person that almost had, FOMO, always had a fear of missing out, always felt like I had to be there and on and, all the time. And I could be in tears being like, I'm so overwhelmed, there's so much going on. But it was that I felt so much pressure to then be that okay person, have that mask on,
Mm.
when really I just wanted to be, wrapped up in my duvet, watching Netflix, eating ice cream by myself, not talking to anyone. And knowing that didn't mean I was broken
Mm.
was really a good thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because there were comments that were made, in previous relationships or whatever, that if I was at that point, there was, oh, what's wrong with you? Suck it up, keep going. What do you mean? Like, you don't want this to happen. Whereas now I'm more like, you know what? I don't have the spoons. I don't have the energy. And
Mm-hmm.
people in my life now respect that far more than they did in my early 20s, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, it's like, I'm not relying on this diagnosis. It's not my excuse. It's just a greater understanding, I think, is of myself.
Yeah. And once again, I think that's key. It's not the whole reason v excuse thing. It's like it's just, as you said, greater understanding that, the way the world works doesn't necessarily fit the way that you need it to work, and that's not a failing. It's just it is what it is, essentially. So I want to go back to what Jade, I believe it was Jade, touched on at the start, the overwhelming pressure on the healthcare system and, actually what is required to get a diagnosis and how easy it was. So we'll start with you, Jade. So how was the process for you? Because, like you said before, there's been a significant time between now and your diagnosis. So obviously the systems have changed. But was it relatively easy when you first were exploring the options, or was it still just as difficult as it might be now?
I feel like it was definitely easier when I was first exploring the options, and I think it was honestly some of it I feel like was luck, and some of it was that it was definitely there was not as much demand on the system. I was also, I think when I turned up to my GP, they had to, I think, figure out how they were going to put me through some sort of referral system, which ended up being the clinical psychology students at the University of Otago, which, like I said, there wasn't a roadmap to adult diagnosis when I was diagnosed. So that I would say, in retrospect, it was long. It was quite a few months. I had to wait a few months from my GP appointment to the referral. The process of speaking to the clinical psychologist who diagnosed me was repeated meetings over several weeks and months.
Mm.
But in the sense of it being difficult, like barriers to access, cost, difficulty, I wouldn't say that it was difficult. It was a very different time.
Mm.
And I feel like what's worth noting about what's influenced and what's led to the current pressure on the system to diagnose people is largely been self-awareness due to exposure online.
Mm.
And there's a lot of criticism that gets leveled at people who start to realize that they may be neurodivergent because of seeing other people talking about it online, is that it's not as valid, it's not as genuine as people who somehow ended up lucking through the medical system like I did. Something that I wonder, I had a really, really good overarching testing. Like I said, I presented for something entirely else. I suspected I had a learning disability,
Mm,
not the one I got diagnosed with, not
mm,
ADHD. When I was diagnosed with ADHD, it did make sense the way that they presented it, the way that they demonstrated the testing, the test results.
mm.
Um, but sometimes I wonder if people are going in with a preconceived idea like I did, and it makes me sad to think that maybe they're not going to be met with the wraparound support that I was met with because of the fact that the system is so overtaxed,
Mm.
which is a shame.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
It makes me sad for people who might only be figuring this out now.
Mm. Absolutely, absolutely, because whilst we could probably do another whole episode on the awful cesspit that is the internet, if it's connecting people that, you recognize something in yourself and someone else who's being as frank and honest as you two are about, whatever's going on in your life, if you can recognize that, then that connection through the internet, even if you don't talk to that person, that's a beautiful thing. And it's just unfortunate that that may have led people to want or need to explore something, and the system just can't support the people the same way that you were supported, Jade. So, Ashley, how about you? What was it like? Because you received your diagnosis, you know, only a few years ago versus Jade's. I'm not even going to give the number because it was a while ago. What was the system like for you? You said you went privately, right?
Yeah, so as I said, it came about because someone I know who had been diagnosed said to me, "Hey, have you ever thought?" And I'm like, "No, absolutely not." But did the whole internet thing, did a lot of the reading, didn't do TikTok. I know there's some criticism about people on TikTok, diagnosing themselves with everything under the sun because, they see it on TikTok. But for me, I went to my GP and I said, oh, how I've been obviously for quite a few years struggling with anxiety and depression. I think there's something else. Have done some reading. I think I actually might have ADHD. And she said, okay, let's explore that further. And then she said to me, my professional advice to you is to go private.
Mm.
The wait lists for adult diagnosis in Wellington are actually shut. And if you do manage to get on the public waiting list, it's at least 2 years. Was kind of the
Wow.
her. So she said, my professional opinion would be if you can afford it, go private.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I said, I'm fortunate enough to have a well-paying job. I went through an online service because there was absolutely no way I was going to get in person in Wellington, where I live,
Mm.
for at least a few months. So ended up, jumping on the old Google and getting some recommendations from various forums, and basically did an entire online process, very privately, and to the tune of, I think it would have cost me all up almost $2,000.
Wow. Okay.
So
That's not a figure that surprises me from talking to
no,
other people in similar positions to you.
yeah. So
Wow.
the fact that my GP actually said that her professional advice would be to go private,
Mm.
because if I was struggling, there was no point waiting. And if I
Mm.
had the means to do so, do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so very different situation to when Jade was diagnosed.
Yeah.
And it does make me sad that while I had the means to do so, so many people out there, especially in this current climate, do
Mm.
not.
Mm-hmm.
So how many people are actually struggling on the daily with not just ADHD, but any sort of neurodivergence or mental health issue? When your GP turns and says to you, the wait lists for the public system are closed, I'm not accepting anyone else
Mm.
unless you're acute. What does acute mean?
Yeah.
Then I can understand why people get desperate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, very different experience. I've heard, $2,000 about the average. Some people slightly less, some people slightly more. Obviously, the fees are at the discretion of the provider as well. So, You know, some
Mhm.
might be cheaper, some might not be. There's a real almost lottery to it,
Mm.
I think. Yeah, very different.
Far out. That's, yeah, like you said, almost polar opposites in terms of the experiences you had. You know, I know that there has been time in between, but that's just, yeah, that's kind of blown my mind a little bit. And like you both, and like Ashley said, you know, I feel for the people that are wanting to just figure out how to make things easier for them or how to understand what it is that's going on, and especially if they don't have the resources to do that. So I might I might be in Jade's capitalism camp
For
because
example, if
fuck
if someone
capitalism.
wants numbers, so for me to even start the process with the provider I actually ended up going with, I
Mm.
had to fill out a questionnaire, like a psychometric questionnaire. That was $150 just to get the test done. So that was just for that. There wasn't even a diagnosis.
Wow.
Then once they sort of saw your test answers and were like, yeah, you might be onto something, then you would get referred to a clinical psychologist
Hmm.
to the tune of $500-600 for an hour.
Oh my
And
God.
then you wouldn't actually, and the way that this provider did it was you had your assessment and then they would withhold your diagnosis until you had paid that $500 or $600. And only
Mm.
upon receiving that $500 or $600, they would then send you your assessment report. Then they would give you one of two options. So you could choose to go immediately to a psychiatrist and talk about medication, or you could go to a life coach, ADHD coach, to work out some coping mechanisms if you didn't want to go down the medication route.
Hmm.
I did a few of those coaching sessions just to see what, because I didn't want to jump immediately to medication.
Hmm.
They were $150 for an hour, and I did 4 of them to
Right.
be, yeah. And then I was like, right, so there's some things that she's pointed out, most of which I was already doing. So I realized that all the stuff I was doing was no longer working for me.
Hmm.
So that's when I went to the medication. That was a 25-minute like online video appointment with a psychiatrist that cost $665 alone. I can see, yeah, I can see Jade's face.
Yeah.
I said that I heard those numbers that you said initially and went, yeah, this is, several thousand is about what I'm hearing, but to have it broken down like that is
Yeah,
still very upsetting.
yeah.
It's
And
very,
so,
very confronting, isn't it? When you
yeah.
put it that
And so,
way.
again, it comes down to I was in a position that was privileged because I had a have a full-time, well-paying job.
Mm.
Um, I have no kids. At that point, I had no partner, single. All my money was my own. How on earth are people who have other financial commitments or on a much lower salary, minimum wage, how are they going to be able to afford that?
Yeah.
That is my question.
Yeah. And at the risk of, adding another episode that we could do from from this beautiful corridor, we could do one about the failings of the healthcare and the mental health system in
Mhm.
this country because by
Yeah,
golly, is it atrocious.
yeah,
But again, that could be we could probably spend several many hours and several many bottles
yeah.
of wine on that one.
Yeah, book me in.
Yeah.
I think we'd need wine for that one.
And
Yeah,
I'm probably going to go straight to gin, let's be honest.
It would
yeah,
be a rant.
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, so
Yeah.
it is quite confronting for a lot of people when you do break it down
Mm.
because, 150 bucks per hour, $620 for 25 minutes,
Yeah.
you know. Oh, and that's not on top of the $85 every 3 months to go see your GP to get a prescription
Hmm.
to be like, hey, because they can only do, especially if you're on like stimulant medication, do 3-month prescriptions at a time. So
Hmm.
now my GP is $80 for an appointment now.
Hmm.
So I have to do that every 3 months.
Yeah.
So it builds up. And so that's what frustrates me when people say, oh, people just seek diagnosis because they want the drugs, you know, they want the
Yep.
Ritalin, they want the. Why would I put myself under that much financial strain?
hmm
You know,
hmm
and why would anyone do that if they didn't have to?
I
Is
think,
my question.
yeah, I think that's a very good point, and nipping that commentary in the bud, because it's not like you can just waltz into a doctor's office and be like, "Hey, I think I'm a little bit neurospicy. Can I have the Ritalin, please?" Because that's not how it works, and you've just demonstrated
Absolutely
that
not.
with, a 5 minute corridor. You've made it very
Mhm.
clear that it's not actually the way it works, which I
Mm.
guess is a good thing because drugs
Oh,
like that should not be abused and sold. Again,
a
another
class
another
B control.
episode, but it's also really upsetting knowing how much of a barrier that could be for people to
Mhm,
receive the help and support that they really need. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. So another thing I want to talk about, it'll be the last, I guess, negative thing in a way, because I want to finish on a happy note. What do you think is your biggest challenge with your diagnosis, if there is one?
What was yours? What?
Deadlines.
Deadlines? Yeah.
Um, yeah, I always thought it was pretty normal and everyone worked really well under pressure and everyone pulled all-nighters the night before university assignments were due because they got better grades if they had that time pressure. Um, in my current job, I don't have that pressure. And so I have to actually make up fake deadlines to
hmm
put pressure on myself to get work done. Otherwise, I'm just going to sit there and do nothing because
The
I
problem
need
with
that.
that is that the person who made that deadline, they're full of shit.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
that's like, I will still struggle every day with that needing to
Mm.
have some sort of pressure and some sort of deadline and feeling like I need to be constantly doing something. I am getting better.
Yeah.
I am getting better. I am getting very much, I get lightly and nicely bullied by my partner for just actually relaxing
Yeah.
and him saying, it's okay if you don't do anything. And I'm like, no, I must do something. And he's like, no, you can chill. It's fine.
He's a good egg. We'll keep him.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
It's,
my biggest challenge, I think.
yeah, it's so funny when you said that, because as you were talking, had flashbacks to conversations we had when you were doing your masters, and you'd tell me about, this late night caffeine fueled all-nighter where you did this thing, and like I was getting contact anxiety just from like, oh my goodness. And then you'd be like, yeah, I got an A+ for that. And I'm like, well, of course you did, because you're smart, but also like, were you not super stressed beforehand? But now that
Yes,
you've said
I
that
was.
out loud, like it's making more sense that you've recognized that, you know, whether it's the intense pressure or not, you need that deadline. It's like, hey, I need something to kind of push me. You know you're capable, you know you can do the mahi, but you need something to help you get the treats, you know?
Yeah, to answer your question, I was constantly stressed, but shout out to my master's cohort of people who may or may not listen to this. You know
Mm.
who you are.
hmm
Um, everyone else was like that. So it just seemed normal to be sitting with two or three people till midnight, ordering Uber Eats to my master's office, and being like, hey, this essay is due at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. We've got about 10 hours. Let's go. Everyone else was doing that. I'm not saying there's a correlation between postgraduate study and the neurospicy of the world, but
I was just about to say, not to cast assumptions on your master's cohort, but we tend to find each other.
Yeah.
yes,
I
yeah,
was just thinking
Oh
about that
boy,
as like you
do we
just
what?
surround yourself
yeah,
with, what is it? The gays and nays, the neurospicy friends, we all tend to stick together.
yeah. As if everyone else is, feeling like what you're feeling like is normal, yeah, we got some discussions. They need to have some self-reflection, I think.
Amazing. Jade, what about you? What's your biggest challenge if you have one?
Yeah, I think that my biggest challenge, and it's very tied into what I was saying before about the guilt and the shame that is inbuilt from how I learned to respond to stresses when I was young, is that this is a very recent realization. I need a lot more. I find things a lot more tiring than the average person. I think
Hmm.
I've come to realize. I think I'm easily overwhelmed and I'm easily overwhelmed by the demands of my life. And once again, linking this back to the capitalism thing, I spend most of my mental energy on my day job and I don't derive a lot of enjoyment from my day job. And so
Hmm.
I feel as though I'm stuck in this spiral of necessarily having to expend a lot of energy at work because I have to, and then feeling an overwhelming sense of guilt that personal projects that I want to do that I never have time for.
Hmm.
And that constant spiral of frustration with myself for seemingly struggling with something that not that other people don't struggle with, because the second you go to say it out loud, it's like other people don't struggle with this. You know it's not true. But what you tell yourself in your head, the little voice that ticks along, and what you know to be true are two different things a lot of the time. And
Mm.
I very much like I have a house that's half renovated and I desperately like to finish it. But what's missing is the mental capacity for me to really spearhead that as a project. It's not
Hmm.
money. Between myself and my partner, we have the money. It's
Sorry,
actually the
sorry.
mental
Your
energy.
husband, your husband.
Yeah, between myself and my new husband. Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's a lot of the time, it's very much the barriers to my life are my own capacity to get things done. And
Mm.
I'm realizing more and more that that is related to the fact that I find things just that bit more overwhelming than I think the average person does. And I take more time to recover
Mm.
from mental exertion than I think the average person does.
Mm.
And that's definitely my biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to highlight because the whole thing that was going through my head as you were saying that was one, I recognize and understand this about you as well because we're very, very close. But also comparing yourself to others like is detrimental to everyone. Like don't should on yourself or someone else. You
Don't shoot all
shouldn't
over yourself.
don't should all over yourself. You know, how many times have I said this to you guys? You don't have to do something just because someone else is doing it. If you don't have the spoons, don't do it. I've said in the chat, Jade, that this is November. It's going to be no for the rest of my life. Like, if I don't want to do it because I don't have the spoons, I'm not going to do it. I'm only going to do things that bring me joy or money because, again, capitalist hellscape. But there's no point in burning yourself out and stretching yourself too thin because you should do something. You shouldn't do anything except be happy and be nice to people. That's my rant. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. It's, and that's what I was saying before. It being diagnosed gives almost gave me that permission to be like, no, I don't want to do that. Why
Yeah.
would I want to do that? Or, you know, to a more greater extent, actually, why do I even hang out with some people? I don't
Mm-hmm.
actually want to hang out with these people. The only
Mm-hmm.
reason I hang out with these people is if, we go out drinking, but I don't really feel like going out drinking and I don't see them any other time. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
It's that sort of permission to miss out and be okay with it, I think is
Mm.
the big thing.
Yeah. 100%. So I now want to flip my last question on its head because again, I know the both of you very, very well, but I guess this is for our listeners and also if the answer is not something that I would expect, what's your biggest strength?
I knew this was coming and I'm not prepared.
Um, I would probably say I'm quite good in a crisis.
I would agree with that.
I think I don't know if that's a specific ADHD neurodivergent thing, but I have read that it can be associated with it. Very good in a crisis because very level and like, right, what are the tasks we need to do immediately to get out of whatever crisis this is? And then we can have the meltdown about the crisis later. But in the moment, you know, take charge, just get stuff done, get what needs to get done. Yeah, and then spend the next like 3-4 days recovering from it. I think that's my biggest strength is, yeah. What's it? Ducking, swanning, paddling furiously under the
Oh,
water,
yeah.
but looking really calm and chill on the outside.
Yeah. But that
Yeah.
doesn't even just, in my experience and the time that we've known each other as well, that doesn't just apply to someone else's crisis. I've seen you do that for yourself the whole time I've known you because, girl, you've been through some shit. And, I know it's not been easy, and I know that the path has been windy and long, but the way you have looked after yourself, has been absolutely incredible.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll
I'm not going to get this too emotional. I'm not going to get too
Don't get emotional, man. If you cry, I cry.
But I mean, honestly, like, I don't know if I would have coped with half the grace that you have through all the shit that you've been through in the last, 3 or 4 years. So whether that's a neurospicy thing or whether that's an Ashley thing or whether it's a beautiful combination of the two, I would definitely agree with your biggest strength.
Oh, thanks, man.
Jade, it's your turn now.
I wanted to touch on something that Ashley said, which I thought about it before our talk, and you never know which way a neurodiverse talk is going to go. But I do think there's a neurological reason why people with ADHD are good in a crisis. It's because suddenly we've been provided with all of the mental stimulation that we lack on a day-to-day basis. My understanding of this is very rudimentary because I have friends who are like neuroscientists. But my basic understanding of it is that ADHD as a function in the brain is we lack the ability to derive stimulation from the environment or derive stimulation from the normal functions that exist in our brain. So suddenly when we get presented with a crisis, which is incredibly overwhelming, suddenly our brains have hit baseline and we can function beautifully. So I just wanted to touch on that because I did think I might touch on my understanding of the brain behind it. But to go back to my answer, again, I don't know if my answer is something that is more to do with me or is a neurodiverse thing. I feel as though my experience of living in a body, living as a person who may look like I'm very normal, but has fundamentally struggled so much, has given me a real sense of compassion for having struggles in life. And I was talking about this with with one of my very good friends who's also diagnosed with ADHD and is also very intelligent and very highly educated. She talked about the justice impetus, the justice complex of people who are neurodivergent. There's a sense of you see that people have experiences, and I very much feel like I want to respect other people's experiences, and I want to come at their experiences and their lives in a way that is respectful, as opposed because one of the things I hate the most is being told, oh, you have trouble focusing. Oh, I have trouble focusing quite a lot, but there's nothing wrong with me. And I didn't have this analogy when I first got diagnosed. God, I wish I did. The analogy is everybody also urinates, but if you're doing it 100 times a day, there's probably something wrong.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Everybody
it's a good one.
experiences ADHD symptoms to a degree, but to the extent that we experience them is what informs us that this is impacting our lives negatively. Um, for me, I really feel very strongly that my ability to find compassion for people that are outside the norm in any sense is something that I will always take. Sometimes I've asked myself, would I choose to not have ADHD if I could just flip a switch? There's definitely been times in my life where I would probably have wanted that switch. Whether or not I would have actually flipped it is a whole different question. But I always ask myself, if I was to lose this, would I lose this part of myself that I know I gained from growing up neurodivergent? And I don't think I would want to give that part of me up.
Yeah. At the risk of getting emotional again, I would also agree with that. I've known you 17 years, Jade, and compassionate is definitely one of the words I would use to describe you.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Beautiful. All right, whilst we're going on the warm fuzzies and positives, to finish us off, what I want from each of you, if you have it, is one piece of advice for someone who might be looking at exploring or has recently had a diagnosis or loves and supports someone that is neurodivergent.
That's my thing. It's not all in your head.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is in your head. That's the key, right? But it's not all in your head. And my advice would be, personally, for me, I didn't want to jump straight to medication. I wanted to explore other avenues. But if medication is something that you want to jump straight to, that is totally fine. If you're just like, hey, I just don't want to even try to work things through, I am just beyond, I just want to feel level, that's more than okay. Medication's there for a reason. Don't feel like you're failing if that's something that you want, is my advice. Just do what works for you. And yeah, it is in your head, but it's not all in your head.
Yeah. Beautiful. What about you, Jade?
Yeah, I think what I would want to pass on is the place that I've come to myself after having been diagnosed for most of my adult life, which is wild to say that out loud, is that not only do you deserve accommodations, you deserve grace. You deserve grace, and sometimes the very first person who has to give you the grace that you need is yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are so many ways that you can improve upon your life through diagnosis, through medication, through coping mechanisms. But if you're always constantly coming from a place of feeling like you're in a deficit, I feel like you're always kind of running on a treadmill. I think you've got to, for me, it's been really important to give myself the grace that I am the way that I am. It's not even necessarily saying that I am okay the way that I am. I just am the way that I am.
Yeah.
And it's just about sitting with it. Grace. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. What a wonderful, beautiful note to finish that on. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here. And like I said earlier, being so open and honest. I think this is the first time with both of you, whether it's together or independently, we've had such an in-depth conversation about this. And, if I'm feeling really wonderful about it, I can only hope that whoever listens to this feels even half as wonderful, because this has been amazing. Thank you both so much.
You're
I
very
didn't think it
welcome.
would be bad, but I'm stoked. It's been a great time.
Yay. Thank you.
This show is kindly supported by the Rainbow New Zealand Charitable Trust. The Rainbow Umbrella theme song is by Paul S. Allen and Beth. Check them out on Spotify. New episodes of the Rainbow Umbrella are available every fourth Thursday on Otago Access Radio 105.4 FM, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. Do you have an idea for an episode or something you would like to kōrero about? Get in touch at rainbowumbrellapod@gmail.com.